All right, so now we're joined by author Gary Shteyngart, author of Absurdistan, and also the Russian Debutante's Handbook, and also your recent memoir, Little Failure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here in Kyiv.
So what brought you here this time?
Well,
what are you doing?
What am I doing here?
I hear you're visiting all the nicest corners,
the
top tourist spots.
At the top, I went to Pripyat. I saw the Russian woodpecker, the dyatlov, that famous array. I think.
And Pripyat, so Chernobyl, right?
Chernobyl, yes, Chernobyl. My next book has 10 different locations. And,
can you say the 10 or some of them?
Yes. So we start in Bangkok, Beijing, Shanghai, Bombay, Seoul. Then we go to Salvador da Bahia in Brazil, Havana, Cuba, Berlin, and then Kyiv and Chernobyl area, and then the North Pole.
Did it start off as a book about cities that start with the letter B, and then you got bored?
Right. Yeah, first it was Shanghai, Mumbai, Dubai, but then I got rid of Dubai. So,
okay.
So things that end with I.
So nonfiction then? About
nonfiction? No, it's fiction.
Fiction.
It's
okay.
fiction. Yeah. And as opposed to most of my books, it's not the usual kind of Russian Jewish narrator. It's actually an attractive woman in her 30s. So I'm hoping to get a whole
Russian
new audience.
Jewish person, a woman could be attractive.
No. It's a Korean Canadian woman.
Oh,
so
I see.
It's a big leap for me.
It's a big step for
big
you.
Step for
going
me.
to new territory.
Yes, new territory.
So, I mean, what drew you to those places in Ukraine? I mean, there are a lot of people that kind of do that sort of tourism, especially Chernobyl's been big for a long time.
Oh, it's great. I mean, Chernobyl was absolutely fascinating. First of all, as a time lapse into, I mean, I was born in Leningrad and I moved when I was 7, but...
So did Chernobyl remind you of home?
Well, the children's books, everything is preserved,
the radioactive children's books.
The children's books, all those signs about, the next siez, the next party congress, all that nonsense is perfectly preserved. And it's not nostalgia per se, but it's this fascinating window into something that doesn't really exist. But not just that, but the whole massiveness of it, the antenna, the Russian woodpecker, the duga, the over-horizon antenna is fascinating to see. It's 50 meters tall, 150 meters wide. Nobody builds things like that anymore.
But it also doesn't work.
It also doesn't work.
Works.
Well, it's Soviet, of course, so it doesn't work. And it costs twice or whatever more than Chernobyl. And so anyway, these things are absolutely fascinating to me.
But I think you're right. I mean, no one builds on that scale anymore, even if it's not a successful project. It's hard to convince people in the US, for example, to build a new highway.
Right, exactly. No, I mean, people do build, like China before their crisis anyway, built the Shanghai sky. I mean, you go to Shanghai and there's 15 different metro lines that are popped up overnight, whereas we can't build in New York the 2nd Avenue subway for 7 years.
Hudson Yards, where we got something
Hudson
new.
Yards, we got something new. Well, but we build for wealthy people. We don't build infrastructure for, this is a huge problem, I think, is that whereas China with a, socialist government is able to say, well, now we're going to build 30 subway lines, and what are you going to do?
Get it all done. So what are your impressions of Ukraine on this trip? I mean, you're doing a little bit of a travel thing. There seems to be, I don't know if you call it a disaster port element, because you have
some disaster port,
there.
Yeah, but Chernobyl actually is not as disastrous as, it's actually this beautiful space, because it stopped.
Well, it was also, I mean, it was a model Soviet plan.
It was amazing. I was talking with, there was another Russian woman there, and we were talking about how we went to the supermarket, which, we didn't have markets like that. We had the gastronome, but this was like almost a Western supermarket with dedicated aisles for beer and cheese. It was like Whole Foods. It was like Chernobyl Whole Foods or Pripyat Whole Foods. It was very interesting. So they actually lived in a much higher standard of living because I think they were special workers at the nuclear plant and stuff like that. So that part is interesting too. But just watching nature take over, that's the sort of, for me, that's important.
When there are all these studies about, there seem to be two warring experts on this. I forget what the proper term is, but on nature, where one argues that man does more damage than radioactivity, so you have all these animals who are there and doing well, and there's another one who argues that's all nonsense.
I don't know. I mean, I can't attest to. I was told of the giant catfish that swim in the cooling tower water, but I think they were giant even before.
And you caught one of them.
I caught one of them and I ate it. So it's I take things seriously. I want to live. No, it was
you can kind of absorb the place.
I can absorb the place forever. No, it really is amazing. And in a way, also traveling to Havana, which sounds completely different from Chernobyl, but the idea that things have stopped. You know, you walk through Havana, your Wi-Fi doesn't work, American credit cards don't work, you're isolated, but at the same time you're more alive. Everything around you is different. It hasn't been overrun, not just by mankind, humanity, but by the social stuff and the second layer of humanity, the internet that exists everywhere. And so strolling through Havana in a way, strangely enough, reminded me a little bit, or strolling through Pripyat and all that, Chernobyl reminded me of Havana, yeah.
So, I mean, what's your own connection to Ukraine? I know you said you were here once just when you were very small, but you also, part of your family was originally from Ukraine.
Sure. They were from Chernovtsi, near Kamyansk-Podolsk, I think. That was my father's side. And they were a huge family. And I think they suffered everything, the Civil War. My grandfather was killed by some gang, you know, and he was, they owned an inn for horse travelers, whatever that's called. That has a name in English, but I'm forgetting it. And then when people were dying during the Holodomor, they were also affected, of course, by and then my grandmother made her way up from this Chernovtsi area. She made her way up to Leningrad, and that was her part of the family, and the other part is from Belarus, from
Belarus.
Vitebsk, yeah, Belarus, yeah. So anyway, so there is that connection, but also we would vacation like good Soviet citizens in the Crimea, in Gurzuf to be specific, and those were of course very happy memories for me. So but it's ironic now that I can't just get on a train and go to Gurzuf.
From Kyiv.
From Kyiv. I can land in Ukraine without any visa, but now to get to Crimea would require this whole, and I wouldn't want to support, how things are.
Well, I mean, yeah, at least that's the legal way to go as opposed to people enter from Russia. And maybe one last question, since you're having all these impressions and you're here as a writer, I mean, what's interesting to you about what's going on in Ukraine and Kyiv now? Is there anything that's special or anything else that surprised you?
I love the food here, and I was talking to a friend of mine who's a correspondent who's a Muscovite, and she said the food was always better here than it was in Moscow or Petersburg, and it's true. Some of these restaurants I mentioned, Lubimy Dyadya is one of my favorite restaurants anywhere in the post-Soviet space. The food is better somehow. Even little foods, little pirashki here and there. The bar scene is wonderful. It's really opening up. Alchemist, Budu Pozhe is a great new bar that just opened. The people feel less aggressive somehow. They feel kinder, they're friendlier, much more easier for them to smile. Maybe that's always been a part of Ukraine versus Russia, but it definitely feels very livable and very easy to be in, despite all the problems that obviously exist on a countrywide scale.
As an American, they'll do small talk. They'll joke with me. When I went to McDonald's to get a cup of coffee once, I was saying, could I get something like Można, blah, blah, blah. And the woman said, well, what would you do if I said no? But I said, I was like, well, I guess I'd be sad. And she's like, all right, fine.
And whenever I get in a taxi in Moscow or Petersburg from the airport, the cab driver will always rail, oh, the Georgians in our courtyard are too loud, or these stupid Chechens, or these awful Tajiks. And this was the first time that the cab driver didn't complain about anybody. I thought that was a really good sign.
It's a less xenophobic cab driver.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well then we'll end on that note, because that's exciting.
That's exciting.
We won't get better than that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, absolutely.